beer, it's good for you.
Hello and welcome to the video. It is time to share the second White Labs official recipe with you for the Tabberer IPA, which is certainly a very popular recipe that blends science with craft and interpretation of East meets West, duo of India Pale Ales. This beer is named after Horace Tabberer Brown, a British chemist who shared a real passion for both science and beer brewing. Whilst he was working as a brewer in the late 1800s, he set up a small lab on site, which became the first record of a scientist using a microscope in a brewery, in keeping with the White Labs logo. So let's get started. Within this video guide, as per usual, I will take you through all of the steps in order, starting with a look at this recipe's vital statistics. As you can see, the recipe offers an approximation of 7.1% ABV. The BUGU here shows the relationship between bitterness and alcohol, and at 0.69 this is certainly going to have a nice bite to it. This recipe will suit any IPA enthusiast who enjoys clean citrus fruity hop flavours, who is not afraid of a little bitterness to it too. This recipe, unlike my usual shared recipes, is not written by me and is the property of White Labs. However, I do have full permission from them to share it with you, and I can confirm that this is the latest and greatest version of this recipe too. More on this later. I fully recommend that you fully convert the recipe before ordering in your ingredients so that you're actually brewing the recipe as intended. I also suggest that you brew this recipe as is the first time, rather than tweaking it. Resisting that temptation, I promise you, will be worth it. I have an easy guide to recipe conversion using Brewfather on my channel as shown on screen now. Within this video, this recipe is being brewed using a Brewzilla Gen 4 65 litre brewing system to the volume of 20 litres, or approximately 5.28 US liquid gallons, but as part of the conversion process this can be scaled and shaped to suit your own brewing system and volume requirements. Shown on screen is the water profile that I recommend using with this recipe. This is ideal for a hoppy beer like this one, as it will push forward the hop flavours further than a regular water profile ever could. I suggest that you plan your water profile ahead. After all, beer is mostly water and its balance is important so that it suits the beer that you are brewing. Brewfather also has some very good documentation on how to use the software to make the necessary water changes too. For this reason, I suggest that all brewers, irrespective of experience, start treating their water as soon as possible for the very best of end results. Let's now get to the brew. The first steps are to preheat your mash water within your brewing system to the first mash temperature, as shown on screen now. You should then either gradually add your malt and stir, or simply add all of the malt at once and use a stainless steel malt mixer attached to a drill as I'm showing here. The one I'm using here is made by Kegland, but the most important point is to use something made of stainless steel or of a material that is food safe. It shocks me to my core the amount of brewers out there using mixers designed for concrete mixing. During this process, however you do it, be very sure to perform a very thorough mixing and ensure that every grain is wet. Getting lazy on this very important step will impact the rest of your brew. With the mash now started, you can see that there is some protein content to this one, giving us some foam on top, which is really nothing to be concerned about. Another note is that you will see some grain floating around the top. This is simply because I didn't use the top plate for this brew. While some systems rely on a top plate for extra efficiency, the Brewzilla system simply just need it when you are mashing something that fills the basket high enough, so that you need a top plate to avoid grain moving outside of the malt pipe. Let's now take a look at the grain bill for this White Labs recipe. Firstly, at 81.6% of our grain bill we have pale ale malt, which will provide the bulk of our fermentables for this recipe, and a pretty blank canvas for us to position those fruity hop flavours onto. Then at 12.2% we have flaked oats. These will provide some extra body and a smoother texture to the beer. If you cannot obtain flaked oats or already have some malted oats, then feel free to use the malted oats as long as you balance the gravity. The difference between the two is not commonly detectable by the average taste palate though. Generally, flaked oats are going to be cheaper and easier to find in most Western countries. Then finally we have Carapils at 6.2%. The original is a dextrin style malt that is designed to increase foam, head retention and enhance mouthfeel without actually adding any extra flavour or colour. Some are sceptical about the worth of Carapils, citing that they notice no real difference when using it. Personally I do, and clearly White Labs does too, but if you're not a believer then feel free to skip this malt rather than write me a message about how much you dislike it. Live and let live, I say. After the mash, the grain basket was raised and I then performed an even sparge using the top plate to encourage more distribution. The water used at this point is 75 degrees Celsius, which is 167 degrees Fahrenheit. However, you could use water that is cold if it suits you better, with the advantage just being that it would take longer to reach the boiling temperature, which is the next step. Once at the boil, it was time to give the top foam, which is protein, a good stir to allow it to drop and join the rest of the trub down on the Brewzilla's false bottom. This is an important step that should be continued throughout the boil if necessary to avoid a boil over. Once the protein was mostly cleared, I then added the recipe's first hop addition and started the boil timer. I then gave the hops a good stir in while removing the rest of the protein on top. Let's now look at the boil schedule for this recipe. First and foremost, I have adjusted this recipe from a 60-minute boil into a modern 30-minute boil schedule. If you are not familiar with this, then please consult with a previous video of mine that's shown on screen that spells out why boil times used to be standard at 60 and 90 minutes and what the benefits are of reducing this time down to 30 minutes, apart from the obvious time saving. The bittering hop for this recipe is Warrior, which is a firm favourite of mine, as my regular viewers will know, due to its clean and smooth bittering qualities, so I was pleased to see that White Labs have used it in this recipe. The next hop addition is at the end of the boil with a 15-minute hopstand, as you can see. So my very next task before this was to run some boiling hot wort through my counterflow chiller, which will be used after the hopstand to chill the rest of the wort as I transfer. You can do this at any point of the boil, but I generally do it in the closing few minutes of the boil. For much more information about counterflow chillers, check out my recently released guide which covers how they work, what benefits they have, and a step-by-step guide to their use for the best results. It was then time to prepare for the hopstand, so towards the end of the boil I added my immersion chiller, which was already clean, but the boiling hot wort will sanitize it. Once the boil timer had run out, I started the cold wort flow into the immersion chiller and gave the wort around the chiller a stir to speed things up, resulting in a chill time from boiling point to a hopstand temperature in less than 1 minute, which is just how I like it. The immersion chiller was then removed and the hops were added and given a very good stir in. I then waited for the 15-minute hopstand time before then further chilling the wort and starting transfer using my counterflow chiller. This hop combination of Amarillo, Citra and Simcoe adds in a very strong citrus element as well as an array of tropical and dank flavour. The fruity flavour offered by this trio include grapefruit, melon, apricot, peach, lemon, lime, passion fruit and berries. You could also experience some pine, spice and herbal flavours too. It was then time for transfer and yeast pitching. This recipe uses White Labs California Ale, which is naturally the company's original classic yeast, and here I am using the dry version. This yeast is known for its very clean flavour to allow hop and malt flavours to shine through, and its ability to attenuate higher than average yeast, which leads to drier beers. It is most popular for fermenting IPA styles, but it can be well used in other styles, including higher gravity styles like imperial stouts, for example. For this recipe I used a fermentation temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, which is the equivalent of 68 degrees Fahrenheit for the entire duration. Personally, I did not ferment this one under pressure, but certainly you could, and as always I would strongly suggest to be within up to 1 bar of maximum pressure for the health of your yeast. This recipe has the dry hopping schedule shown on screen. I would suggest a contact time of at least 3 days and ideally no more than 5 days. The hops used here are the same as those used in the hopstand, and this dry hop will reinforce those hop flavours and aromas. Add your dry hops when you are between 5 to 10 gravity points away from your predicted final gravity. I have tried all methods of dry hopping, but frankly nothing so far has had as good results, and there is no need to buy a book either. The very most important thing here is to keep things clean and sanitary, so here is a guide to doing that in a way that has never failed me so far in hundreds of brews. In this example I'm going to use a hop sock, but the procedure is similar with other container types. This starts with boiling the bag. I strongly recommend doing this no matter if the bag has been previously used and cleaned, or if it's a brand new one straight out of the packaging. I then add this bag into a clean container and add sanitizer as a further safeguard. This will be the same container that I used to load the hops into. After this point I then wash and sanitize my hands, and this is repeated if I need to touch the bag after touching anything that is not clean and sanitary. These are very important steps to avoid contamination, which is all too common when it comes to homebrewers making IPAs because of this step. I then carefully add the dry hops with the bag lining the container, being sure that nothing touches the bag except for the hops. Once you have loaded all of your hops into the bag, then be sure to tie a nice strong knot to keep all of the hops contained. This loosely fitting hop bag, so there is room to expand, can now be added into your fermenter. Let's now take a look at the finished beer, starting with the pour, and after this I will give you my tasting notes. You can see that the pour is a very nice light golden colour, but once in the glass the end beer is that classic golden orange. As always, this beer is in its natural state, and as is my preference, no attempts have been made to clear it. The example you see here is at around the 4-week point from kegging, and like most IPA beers, it is definitely best consumed when fresh. Temperature plays a vital role when it comes to beer flavour, and for the best experience I would suggest a drinking temperature of between 7 to 10 degrees Celsius, which is the equivalent of between 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Here is the same beer with better lighting behind it, and here are my tasting notes at this 4-week point as follows. Aroma. The aroma found here is led by fresh citrus notes of orange, lemon, grapefruit and peach. It's certainly very inviting. Flavour. On entry this is very clean and very fruity with lots of citrus flavours that are led by grapefruit but soon develop into orange, lemon and lime with a background that combines mostly peach and apricot with some berry. The finish here has a really nice bite to it, reminding you that this is a solid American IPA rather than a New England IPA, and comes along with some nice added dank pine notes too, which I really enjoy. Certainly this beer also has a nice amount of body and enhanced texture thanks to the use of oats in this recipe. And here are some notes. White Labs tell me that the previous recipe they had for this beer had a fair percentage of the grain bill as Vienna malt, which led to some feeling that the beer was too malty and not hoppy enough, so a rewrite was needed in both the grain and hop areas of the recipe, and this current version has stood the test of time and approval. And here is my final impression. This is a great example of an American West Coast IPA that offers a wide range of citrus-driven fruity flavours along with dank pine finish, and that has a very nice pleasant bite to it. So there you have my tasting notes. I would be very happy to see yours via the comments section of this video once you have brewed this one and it's ready for drinking. My thanks go out to White Labs for allowing me to share this recipe with my viewers. It is a fun one to brew and a tasty one to enjoy in the glass. I do hope that you found this video useful, informative and interesting. If so, why not consider liking and subscribing? For further support you can join the channel's Facebook group, and if you would like to support the channel then check out the channel's merchandise store, as all profits go back into the channel. Until next time, happy brewing!